Most linen brands are selling you a word, not a fabric. The label says linen. The reality underneath might be a thin, viscose-blended fake that pills within a month and falls apart by summer's end. The difference between real investment linen and a glorified napkin comes down to one number almost nobody checks before buying. Today, we are revealing 11 brands where that number actually holds up. The ones doing the real work. Fiber first, marketing second. Number 11, Quint. Quint built its entire business model around removing the markup that most linen brands charge for, nothing more than a recognizable name. Working directly with European linen mills that supply considerably more expensive labels without ever putting their own name on the finished garment. That direct sourcing relationship is the entire foundation of the brand's value proposition, and it works specifically because Quint eliminated the layers of wholesale markup, retail markup, and brand premium that traditionally separate a linen mill's actual production cost from what a customer eventually pays at checkout. The mills supplying Quint are frequently the same facilities supplying European fashion houses, charging 4 and 5 times more for comparable fabric, a fact the brand discloses openly rather than treating as a trade secret. The Quint linen shirts and dresses use a mid-weight European flax at a gauge that holds structure without feeling stiff, and the brand discloses its factory relationships with a transparency that most linen retailers, including several charging 3 times the price, decline to offer. The weave density sits in a range that resists the see-through thinness common in budget linen, while still delivering the breathability that makes the fiber worth choosing in the first place. At $30 to $50 for a piece that uses comparable fiber sourcing to brands charging well over $100, Quint is the entry point that makes the rest of this list possible to compare against honestly, establishing a baseline fiber quality that every brand ranked above it on this list has to meaningfully exceed to justify its higher price. The next brand took a similar direct-to-consumer approach and applied it specifically to the basics category, where linen quality is hardest to fake and easiest to notice once you know what to look for. Number 10. Everlane. Everlane's linen range benefits from the same radical transparency model. The brand built its entire identity around publishing the factory, the fiber origin, and the true cost breakdown for its linen pieces in a way that almost no competitor in this category bothers to replicate. That transparency model, originally built to expose the markup hidden inside conventional retail pricing, applies with particular clarity to linen, specifically because linen's actual production cost is more easily verified against published mill pricing than almost any other natural fiber category. A customer who wants to check whether Everlane's pricing reflects genuine fiber cost rather than brand premium can do so directly using the brand's own published cost breakdown. The linen shirting and the wide-leg linen trousers use a Portuguese milled flax with a weight substantial enough to resist the see-through thinness that plagues so much fast fashion linen. And the stitching density at the seams holds up to repeated washing without the fraying that cheaper linen blends develop within weeks of regular wear. Portugal has emerged as one of the more underappreciated linen weaving regions in Europe, producing fabric with a consistency that several more recognizable mill regions do not always match batch to batch. Everlane's linen sits at a price point, generally $60 to $90, that reflects genuine fiber cost rather than brand premium, and the transparency documentation backing that price is publicly available for anyone who wants to check it before adding the item to their cart. That level of accountability is rare enough in the broader fashion industry that its mere presence functions as a quality signal on its own. If this list is changing how you shop for linen, hit the like button and subscribe right now. Every week, we go exactly this deep into the fabrics, worth your money, and the ones quietly cutting corners behind a flattering photograph. Number 9. Hill House Home. Hill House Home built an entire cultural moment around a single linen silhouette, the nap dress, and in doing so, proved something the broader fashion industry had been slow to acknowledge, that genuinely well-constructed linen could generate organic, sustained demand without needing a synthetic blend to make it more wearable. The viral success of the nap dress could easily have tempted the brand toward the same shortcuts so many viral fashion moments eventually take, diluting fabric quality to chase volume once demand outpaces what a small batch supply chain can comfortably produce. Hill House largely resisted that temptation, maintaining its core linen sourcing standards, even as the silhouette became one of the most recognizable in American fashion over a remarkably short period. The brand's linen sourcing uses a substantial European flax, with a finish calibrated specifically to avoid the stiff, scratchy texture that turns many shoppers away from linen entirely, softening meaningfully after the first wash rather than requiring years to reach a comfortable hand feel, the way some heavier, unfinished linens do. That pre-softening process is a deliberate finishing decision, not an accident of the weave, and it is precisely why the brand's dresses develop such an immediate, enthusiastic word of mouth, following among first-time linen buyers who had previously been put off by the fiber's reputation for scratchiness. At $120 to $165, Hill House sits at the upper end of accessible pricing, but the construction, particularly the smocking and the lined bodices that most fast fashion linen dresses skip entirely, justifies the gap in a way a simple side-by-side comparison makes obvious. The smocking alone, executed by hand, or through a process designed to replicate hand smocking's elasticity and durability, is a detail that adds meaningful labor cost, and that lower-priced competitors routinely simulate with a cheaper, less durable elastic panel instead. The next brand takes the opposite approach entirely, building its identity around minimalism so deliberate that the fabric itself has nowhere to hide if the quality isn't there. Number 8. Cuyana. Cuyana's fewer, better things philosophy applies to linen with particular clarity because a minimalist silhouette with almost no embellishment puts the entire burden of the garment's quality on the fiber and the drape. With no smocking, no print, no distracting detail to mask a thin or poorly woven fabric. This is a genuinely demanding design constraint to work within. A brand that relies on embellishment, pattern, or an elaborate silhouette has multiple places to distract a shopper's eye away from the underlying fabric quality. Cuyana's restrained, architectural design language removes every one of those distractions, which means the linen itself has to be substantial enough to carry the entire visual and tactile impression of the garment on its own. The brand's linen shirting and wide leg pants use a substantial Italian milled flax that holds its structure through the kind of clean architectural lines Cuyana built its reputation on, the fabric weight doing the work that a more elaborate design would otherwise have to compensate for. Italian linen milling has a long-standing reputation for consistency in both weight and finish, and Cuyana's sourcing relationships within that region reflect a deliberate decision to prioritize fabric integrity over a lower-cost alternative sourced from a less established region. At $88 to $148, Cuyana's linen pieces are priced to last years rather than a single season, and the brand's deliberately small, slow-moving collection means each piece receives more design and sourcing attention than a brand releasing dozens of styles per month could realistically manage. That slower release cadence is not a limitation. It is the structural decision that makes the brand's quality consistency possible in the first place. Number 7. Eileen Fisher. Eileen Fisher has been working with natural fibers, organic linen prominent among them, since the brand's founding in 1984, and the philosophy behind that fiber choice has not required revision in 4 decades, because it was correct from the start. That 4-decade consistency is worth sitting with for a moment, because almost no other brand on this list, or in the broader linen category generally, can claim a fiber philosophy that has survived multiple decades of changing fashion cycles without meaningful compromise. Trends in silhouette have shifted considerably across that period. The brand's commitment to substantial, natural fiber construction has not moved. The brand's organic linen is sourced with a documented sustainability chain that few linen brands at any price point can match, and the silhouettes are cut generously, designed specifically to allow linen's natural drape to do the visual work rather than fighting the fiber's tendency to soften and relax with wear. That generous cut is itself an acknowledgement of how linen actually behaves over time, rather than an attempt to force the fiber into a silhouette better suited to a more structured material. The Renew Take-Back program, through which worn Eileen Fisher garments are reclaimed, cleaned, and resold, only makes commercial sense for fabric built well enough to survive that second life, and linen's durability is precisely why the program works as well as it does for this specific fiber. A program built around reclaiming and reselling worn garments is, in effect, a built-in quality audit. If the fabric were not durable enough to survive a previous owner's years of wear and still be worth reselling, the program simply would not function at the scale it currently operates at. At $140 to $220, Eileen Fisher's linen sits at a price that reflects genuine longevity rather than seasonal trend chasing, the kind of investment that the brand's own customers frequently describe wearing for a decade or longer, without the fabric losing its integrity, structure, or color depth. The next brand approached linen from the opposite direction entirely, building a business specifically and exclusively around the fiber, rather than treating it as one category among many. Number 6. MagicLinen. MagicLinen operates out of Lithuania, a country with one of the longest continuous linen weaving traditions in Europe, and the brand's singular focus on linen, rather than treating it as a seasonal category within a broader catalog, shows directly in the construction quality. Lithuania's linen heritage dates back centuries, and the country remains one of the few places in the world where the entire supply chain, from flax cultivation through weaving and finishing, exists within a relatively concentrated geographic and cultural tradition. A brand sourcing from within that ecosystem inherits generations of accumulated technical knowledge that a brand sourcing linen as a side category from a generalist textile supplier simply does not have access to in the same way. Because the brand produces nothing but linen, every sourcing decision, every weave gauge, every finishing process is optimized specifically for this one fiber, rather than adapted from a production line built primarily for cotton or synthetic blends. That singular focus removes the compromises that inevitably creep into a multi-fiber production line, where machinery, finishing chemistry, and quality control processes are frequently calibrated as a best-fit average across several different fiber types, rather than optimized for any one of them specifically. The clothing range, dresses, shirting, and wide-leg trousers uses a stone-washed European flax that arrives already softened, eliminating the scratchy break-in period that turns many first-time linen buyers away from the fiber entirely. The stone washing process, while adding a manufacturing step, and therefore a cost, produces a hand feel that immediately differentiates the brand's product from raw, unfinished linen competitors at a similar price point. At $55 to $90, MagicLinen delivers a specialist construction quality at a price point that general clothing brands sourcing linen as a side category rarely manage to match. Precisely because the brand's entire operational infrastructure exists to serve this one fiber category rather than spreading resources and expertise across a broader and more generic product catalog. The next brand took that same specialist focus and applied it specifically to the category linen, performs best in sleep and loungewear, where breathability and drape matter more than almost anywhere else in a wardrobe. Number 5. In-Bed Store. In-Bed Store built its reputation on linen, sleepwear, and loungewear specifically, a category where the fiber's natural temperature-regulating properties matter more directly than in almost any other part of a wardrobe. And the brand's construction reflects an understanding of that functional requirement, rather than treating linen as a purely aesthetic choice. Linen's moisture-wicking and breathability properties are well documented, and they matter more during 8 hours of overnight wear than during a few hours of daytime activity, where a wearer has more control over layering and environment. A brand building specifically around sleepwear has to take those functional properties seriously, in a way that a daywear-focused brand, where aesthetic and silhouette concerns often dominate the design conversation, does not always prioritize to the same degree. The brand's linen pajama sets and robes use a relaxed, generously cut silhouette, specifically engineered to maximize airflow, with a fabric weight light enough for warm climates, while still holding the structural integrity that prevents the garment from feeling flimsy or transparent. That balance, light enough to breathe, but substantial enough to hold its shape and avoid see-through thinness, is a genuinely difficult engineering target, and it is the specific problem In-Bed Store's entire catalog is built to solve. At $90 to $140, In-Bed Store sits in a specific niche, sleep and loungewear rather than daywear, but within that niche, the construction quality and the fiber sourcing rival brands charging considerably more for considerably less specialized garments. A customer comparing In-Bed Store's linen pajama sets against a general daywear brand's loungewear offering will typically find the specialist brand has invested more deliberately in the specific properties that matter for overnight comfort. If this list has you reconsidering what's actually in your closet for summer, subscribe right now before we get into the back half of this ranking, because the next 6 brands are where the real investment quality argument starts to take shape. Number 4. Toast. The British heritage brand approaches linen with a design philosophy rooted in craft traditions, often collaborating directly with artisan weavers and dyers, rather than sourcing exclusively through industrial mills, a process that shows directly in the texture and character of the finished fabric. That collaboration with artisan producers represents a meaningfully different supply chain model than almost every other brand on this list, most of which source from established industrial mills, regardless of how transparent or well-documented those relationships are. An artisan weaving process introduces natural variation, slight irregularities in tension, slubbing, and texture that a fully industrial process is specifically engineered to eliminate. For Toast, those irregularities are not a flaw to be corrected. They are the entire point. The brand's linen pieces frequently use slightly irregular, hand-finished weaves that mass-produced linen cannot replicate, giving each garment a texture and depth that signals genuine craft rather than uniform factory output. Two Toast garments from the same style and the same production run may show subtle variation in weave texture or dye uptake, a characteristic that some customers initially mistake for inconsistency before recognizing it as evidence of the hand process behind the fabric. At $120 to $220, Toast sits at a meaningful premium, but the brand's commitment to documented, often small batch production means the price reflects an actual scarcity and labor investment rather than a brand markup applied to a mass-produced fabric. The brand frequently publishes information about the specific artisan partnerships behind individual collections, a level of sourcing storytelling that, unlike vague sustainability marketing common elsewhere in fashion, is grounded in named partnerships and traceable production relationships. The next brand brought a similarly artisanal sensibility to linen, but built it specifically around vintage-inspired silhouettes and small batch, limited production runs that sell out before most shoppers even hear about them. Number 3. Christy Dawn. Christy Dawn built its entire brand around small batch, dead stock, and regeneratively farmed fiber production, and the brand's linen pieces specifically reflect a sourcing philosophy that prioritizes fabric origin and environmental impact as seriously as the brand prioritizes silhouette and design. Regenerative farming, a practice that actively rebuilds soil health rather than simply avoiding the most harmful conventional agricultural inputs, represents one of the more ambitious sourcing standards attempted by any brand in this entire category. Most brands claiming sustainable sourcing are describing a reduction in harm. Christy Dawn's farm collection is attempting something more demanding, a supply chain that leaves the land in better condition than it found it. The farm collection, grown from regeneratively farmed cotton and linen, represents one of the most thoroughly documented supply chains in accessible fashion, with the brand publishing details about the specific farms and growing practices behind each fabric batch. That level of granular, farm-specific documentation goes considerably further than the general sustainably sourced language most competitors rely on, allowing a customer to trace a specific garment back to a specific growing season and a specific piece of land. The vintage-inspired dresses use a substantial linen weight that holds the brand's signature voluminous silhouettes without collapsing into shapelessness, a common failure point for lighter-weight linen attempting similar designs. A voluminous, gathered silhouette demands more structural integrity from the fabric than a fitted silhouette does, because there is more fabric volume that needs to hold its shape rather than simply draping flat against the body. At $168 to $228, Christy Dawn's pricing reflects both the small batch production model and the documented sustainability of the sourcing, a combination genuinely difficult to find, replicated elsewhere in the linen category. The brand's limited production runs also mean individual styles frequently sell out permanently, a scarcity that is a direct consequence of the small batch model, rather than an artificial marketing tactic designed to manufacture urgency. The next brand returned to the same Baltic linen tradition that built MagicLinen's reputation, but applied it with an even more singular and meticulous focus that has made it something close to a cult favorite among linen specialists. Number 2. Not Perfect Linen. Not Perfect Linen, also operating out of the Lithuanian linen tradition, has built a reputation specifically among linen connoisseurs for a level of construction, transparency, and fabric quality that rivals brands charging significantly more. A reputation built almost entirely through word of mouth rather than mainstream marketing. That word-of-mouth growth pattern is itself a meaningful signal in a category as saturated with marketing language as linen has become. A brand that grows primarily through customer recommendation, rather than through paid advertising and influencer partnerships, has typically earned that growth by delivering a product that performs well enough across repeated use to generate genuine, unprompted enthusiasm. The brand discloses the specific gram weight of every fabric used across its range, a level of technical transparency almost no competitor in this category offers, allowing the customer to directly compare the substance of a not-perfect linen garment against any other linen piece using an actual, measurable standard, rather than marketing language alone. Gram weight, the actual mass of fabric per square meter, is the single most objective and comparable metric available for evaluating linen substance, and the fact that so few brands publish it suggests many would rather not invite that direct comparison. The clothing, robes, dresses, and separates uses a stone-washed, pre-washed linen that arrives soft and ready to wear immediately, eliminating the lengthy break-in period associated with stiffer, unwashed linen fabrics. That pre-washing process also pre-shrinks the fabric, meaning the garment a customer receives is already at its stable, settled dimensions, rather than continuing to shrink and shift shape across the first several washes, the way untreated linen often does. At $60 to $110, Not Perfect Linen delivers a gram weight and softness standard that brands charging 2 to 3 times more do not consistently exceed, making it one of the strongest pure value arguments anywhere on this list for the shopper who wants to apply the same objective, specification-driven comparison. This entire ranking has been built around Not Perfect Linen's own transparency, makes that comparison easier to perform than with almost any other brand examined here. One brand remains, and it earns the top position by applying the same rigorous, fiber-first philosophy that defines this entire list to a category where almost no other brand has attempted it with comparable seriousness: tailored, structured linen pieces meant to function as genuine investment wardrobe staples, rather than purely casual or seasonal pieces. Number 1. Son de Flor. Son de Flor built its identity around a specific and demanding standard: linen tailoring substantial enough to hold structure in jackets, trousers, and fitted dresses, a category where most linen brands quietly default to a looser, less structured silhouette, specifically because their fabric isn't substantial enough to hold a true tailored shape. This is, in many ways, the most ambitious application of linen attempted by any brand on this entire list. Every other brand ranked here has, to varying degrees, worked within linen's natural tendency toward relaxed draping silhouettes. Son de Flor set out to prove that the same fiber, with sufficiently heavy weight and sufficiently rigorous construction, could compete directly with wool and cotton tailoring, in a category that conventional fashion wisdom had long assumed linen simply could not perform convincingly. The brand's heavyweight, European linen, sourced through relationships with mills that supply considerably more expensive heritage tailoring houses, allows Son de Flor to produce structured blazers and trousers that maintain a crisp silhouette through a full day of wear, without the wrinkling and collapse that lighter linen experiences within hours. The fiber weight required to achieve that structural performance is considerably heavier than what most of the other brands on this list use for their daywear and loungewear pieces, reflecting the fundamentally different engineering problem tailored linen presents compared to a relaxed dress or shirt. The construction includes proper interfacing and lining in the structured pieces, details most linen brands skip entirely because their fabric weight cannot support the additional structure those details require. Interfacing, the stiffening fabric layer typically used inside collars, cuffs, and blazer fronts to maintain shape, only functions correctly when paired with an outer fabric substantial enough to hold that added structure without becoming stiff or unwieldy, a balance Son de Flor's fiber sourcing was specifically chosen to achieve. At $180 to $320, Son de Flor sits at the top of this ranking's price range, but it is solving a problem none of the other 10 brands fully attempt, proving that linen can function as genuine tailoring, not just a relaxed summer fabric. When the fiber sourcing and the construction are both taken seriously enough to support that ambition, a Son de Flor blazer is, in a meaningful sense, the most technically demanding garment examined across this entire ranking, and the price reflects the genuine difficulty of achieving that result with a fiber not naturally suited to the task. the brands worth your money disclose their fabric weight, their mill relationships, and their fiber origin without being asked. The ones that don't are usually hiding a thinner weave or a synthetic blend behind a word that, on its own, no longer guarantees anything. A word that has been stretched thin enough by the broader fashion market that it can no longer be trusted without verification. The next time you're shopping for linen, check the gram weight before you check the price tag. That single number will tell you more about what you're actually buying than anything else on the label. Click the next video on the left to learn exactly how to read a fabric label like someone who actually knows what they're buying.